Welcome to Torah Today Ministries. My name is Grant Luton.
And I'm Robin, and every week I think I need to change that up because it just sounds so redundant.
Robin Luton. Okay.
But
just so
welcome everyone. We look forward to a little time together here to talk about quite a portion.
Yes. Portion Pinchas or Phinehas in English, and it covers Numbers 25 verse 10 through chapter 30 verse 1.
And Grant, last time we were sharing, we had mentioned how we had experienced the virtual reality game, and I think that struck a chord with a lot of people because we've had people contact us and say, wow, what a clear picture of things. And so you and I have been thinking more and more about how this world really is so... God is masked in this world, and there's beauty to be seen, and there's eternal reality to be seen. But you have to look through the mask, and you have to look beyond the things that can distract us. And this portion is all about God's people becoming so very, very distracted. And the final test in the wilderness, right?
This is the final test.
And what did this test look like?
Well, they got caught up in the virtual reality. They got seduced by these women from Moab and Midian.
And let's remember, whose suggestion was this?
Balaam's.
And it was just merely a suggestion, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is the amazing thing. King Balak had hired Balaam to come and to curse the Israelites. But every time he went to curse them 4 times, instead of curses, blessing came out. But we discover in this week's portion that the people who could not be cursed could be seduced. And that's a powerful lesson for us as believers today.
So we are protected. He is a shield around us, but it's up to us to guard our hearts. And as I've been thinking about that whole virtual reality picture, I have become so aware, Grant, that what we do as followers of the King, as members of an invisible kingdom in this world, I have to have the helmet of salvation on.
That's right.
It's not a virtual reality helmet that takes me into a pretend world. It is thoughts and meditations that keep me aware of the real world.
Yeah, that's the beauty of Shabbat. It's like we work for 6 days in this world, exercising our influence on the physical world to create things and build and make a living. But 1 day out of 7, it's like God says, okay, come take off the virtual reality helmet.
Yes.
Look into my word.
And remind each other.
Worship and prayer. Spend time with fellow believers who also have taken off their VR helmets.
And put on the other helmet.
Yes, and remember what is real.
Right.
And the prayers, this is the wonderful thing about liturgy. On Shabbat, the liturgy does not include requests for things.
It's a reminder.
It's all about who God is,
it's
what
meditation.
He has done.
It's remember what is true, remember what is real.
Yes.
Hang in there, don't give up. And such, this portion, for me anyway, has a theme of zeal.
Yes.
And of enthusiastic showing up.
Yeah.
And I made a note to myself this week and asked myself, what am I willing to fight for? What matters enough for me in this life to show up and stand strong and not give up? And Sabbath is one of those things, Grant.
Yes.
Because it is my lifeline. And remembering his precepts and his statutes over and over, that is what we meditate on. Because, Grant, these aren't just stories about people that happened long ago. These are people that we're connected to.
These are our stories.
These are our stories, and these are the way God connects us to him.
Well, you mentioned that word zeal, and just yesterday I recorded a new Hebrew key teaching for that series, and the name of the teaching was, Is God Jealous? Because depending on the translation, our portion opens with these words. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the Cohen, turned back my wrath from upon the children of Israel when he jealously, and this is hard to translate, This translation says avenged me, but it was jealous for me. It's the same word. And so I did not consume the children of Israel in my jealousy. And then it's used again in verse 13, because he was jealous for his God.
Now we think of jealousy as a negative trait.
Yeah.
But
Well,
let's define God's jealousy.
Well, first of all, other translations will say zealous. And there might be some other translations that use other words. And so this word in Hebrew is a very odd word. We don't have an exact English equivalent for it. But to translate it as jealous or as zealous is perfectly okay. But it's actually a combination of the two. But how do you combine jealousy with zeal? How do you do that? And in the teaching yesterday, I said you kind of have to take both of these words, jam them together, and sand off all the rough edges, and you get a general idea of what the word is. But in Hebrew, the word is kana, kof nun aleph, kana, and it has to do with ownership.
Right.
When you see this word, think of ownership. So as not to do the whole teaching again here in our parsing the portion, let me just give you an example. Let's say I, as a husband, I leave you in the car and I run into the store to grab something real quick, and when I come back out to the parking lot, I see the car, I see you in it, and I see a man trying to pick the lock to get into my car.
Right.
Now, the feeling he has is called kana, and the feeling I have is called kana.
Really?
Yes. For me, kana means, wait a minute, that's my car, that's my wife, that's my stuff in the car. This man has no business touching what is mine, especially my beloved, my wife. So this vengeance, this anger that comes up with me, inside of me, is called kana. Because this is mine. You are my wife. This is my vehicle. So I don't know if he's after you or after the car or after both, but they all are mine, and he's not going to have them. On the other hand, what he sees is also kana, but in the form of jealousy. He wants my wife, or he wants my
wants
car.
what doesn't belong to him.
Yeah, he doesn't own.
Right.
But it has to do with ownership. And what his feeling and his drive is also called kana. So in Scripture, you'll see it have kind of a positive as well as a negative connotation. When Rachel was jealous of Leah for having children, she took action based on her jealousy, and she cried out and accused Jacob of not giving her children. And it says she was kana of her sister.
Well, the passage that is ringing in my mind right now is when Yeshua goes into the temple and he found those selling sheep and doves and exchanging money there.
Yes.
And he became zealous.
Yes, it's the
which
same word.
Is jealous.
Yes, it's from Psalms where it says, zeal for your house, kana for your house, has consumed me.
And because he recognized who really owned that space and what that space was intended for, he was consumed with kana, with zeal, with jealousy. And so he became enraged that those who didn't understand the ownership of the temple and the purpose for the temple had moved in and turned it into a den of thieves.
So Phinehas's ability to see that God owned the Israelites, that they were his people, they had been redeemed or purchased with a price, they had come into a covenant with him, they were his people. They couldn't be cursed by Balaam. And that nothing could get through God's shield to get to them. But they could be seduced to step out from behind that shield.
And they forgot what's real.
And they forgot who their owner was. They forgot who their God was. So they committed idolatry, sexual immorality, and more than 24,000 people died.
They were seduced. And I've been thinking a lot about how true zeal, godly zeal, I remember it by rhyming it with the word real, because when I remember what is real, when I remember the invisible reality of God's eternal kingdom, then I can be consumed with zeal for what matters.
Yes.
Because
That's right.
if nothing in this world matters enough for me to wholeheartedly show up, I'm forgetting what's real.
Absolutely. You know, when I was talking about this with you a couple of days ago about this word zeal or jealousy, kana, you said, well, it sounds kind of weird to say a wife belongs to her husband. And but I thought of that verse in Song of Solomon where it says, Ani ladodi vadodi li, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine.
Is mine.
God belongs to us. We belong to God.
What kind of husband shrugs his shoulders and says ho hum when he becomes aware that his wife is stepping out on him and committing
Yes.
sin and adultery with another? Which brings us to the fascinating point that this word for zeal is used more times in a particular passage in the Torah than any
Yes.
other passage, remember?
Yes, it's in the book of Numbers in chapter 5. It's the account of the sotah, the wayward wife, or the wife who's suspected of being wayward. And it talks about the husband who loves his wife. He experiences kana, and it's used 10 times in the passage because he suspects her of being unfaithful, but he's not sure. And this jealousy's eating him alive. So God has provided a way that it could be proven once and for all whether she was or was not unfaithful, because he wanted there to be peace between husband and wife. And if there's jealousy there, then that my wife has been seduced by another man, there has to be a way to resolve that.
Well, the kind of jealousy that God has is the kind of jealousy that he has on our behalf.
Yes.
The kind of jealousy that humans have is the kind of jealousy they feel for their own behalf,
Right.
on their own behalf, regardless of the harm that comes to others. And that's exactly what was happening in this portion. People wanted what they wanted.
Yes.
And they followed after their eyes and their hearts, right? So let's describe the scene and what Phinehas does as a result of what happens.
Well, the scene is described at the end of last week's portion, which ends with a real cliffhanger.
Right.
Zimri and Cosby. Cosby is I imagine, a very beautiful, attractive, idol-worshipping woman.
And what does her name mean?
My lie or my deception.
Isn't that interesting?
And Zimri, who is a leader in the tribe of Simeon, his name means my song. But his song ended when he hooked up with my deception, my lie. And there they are, involved in immorality right in the entrance of the tabernacle.
And it wasn't unusual compared to what was going on around them. Everybody around them was kind of doing the same thing.
A lot of people were.
A lot. It felt
24,000
like
were.
everyone. Just
Yeah.
like in my mind, sometimes I look around and it feels like everyone is just falling for the lie.
So at the end of last week's portion, Phinehas says, enough. And he picks up a spear. He goes over to where Zimri and Cosby are there on the ground, and he runs a spear through the both of them into the ground.
Oh my
Just
gosh.
pins them to the ground like a bug. And immediately the plague stopped.
And that pleased Hashem.
Now, this is the thing that's so wild. This plague is going through the camps, killing people. But the plague doesn't stop them from continuing to indulge in immorality, sexual immorality.
They didn't
Because
make the connection.
They had lost their minds.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking that this plague, this scene, which is the final test in the wilderness, after this, there are no more tests. It's all done. That this is a picture of the end days when we see believers, these people call themselves believers, being seduced by the world. They see the world dying. They see people around them falling like flies. They see the redeemed community crumbling around them, but they're still indulged in doing what I want to do. And I think this is a picture of the final test here in these end times in the redeemed community. So we can either be a Zimri who's engaged in idolatrous immorality, or we can be a Phinehas who recognize I am not my own. I'm bought with a price. I belong to God.
Regardless of what it feels like the majority of people are thinking and doing.
Yeah. Well, you know what the very heart and soul of Satanism is just doing what I want to do. That's all it is.
What's right in your own eyes.
That's what Satan did. He did what was right in his eyes. And as I often say, Satan's not interested in getting us to do his will. He's interested in getting us to do our own. So all you have to do to act like the devil is do what you want to do because you feel like doing it. But a Phinehas, a Yeshua, does what God wants to do. What did Yeshua say? I only do the things that I see my Father doing. I only do the things that he tells me to do. I do nothing of myself. And he is very clear. Yeshua said, I don't do what I want to do. I do what he wants me to do.
Well, what happens is a spiritual apathy sets in.
Yes.
And as Taste for Torah mentions in this portion, one of the lessons we learn from all of this is that apathy is an enemy of our soul. It truly is.
It is death.
And so zeal or jealousy for what is true and real is like a foundational trait to hold up the strength of all the other soul traits that we need to build, correct?
Yes. Well, you know, our time is drawing to an end and we've barely gotten started. But one of the things that to me is important, and I encourage listeners to do this study on their own. We see two great rebellions in the book of Numbers. And the one was Korah's rebellion. And then here we can call it Zimri's rebellion. Zimri's was very fleshly. It was a lust of the flesh. But Korah's was pride of life. Zimri it was physical lust versus what you might call a religious lust.
Don't you think they go hand in hand most of the time?
Well, what's interesting, Zimri was from the tribe of Simeon and Korah was from the tribe of Levi. Simeon and Levi were brothers. Remember, they're the two who went into Shechem and slew the people.
Because those tendencies are partners.
They are. And Zimri was pinned to the earth. Korah was swallowed by the earth.
The earth.
The earth.
The earth.
So,
not the heavens.
Yes.
The earth.
And you know, when I think about Simeon and Levi, of Zimri and Korah, I think of the two prodigal sons. I know we always say it's the parable of the prodigal son. Both brothers were prodigals.
They were.
But one was attracted by the flesh and the world. The other was a religious snoot.
Right.
Which one's worse?
Yeah.
Which one's worse? I know the father did not chew out the one who went and slept with the pigs and ate the pig food. But he did correct the older brother who stayed at home, the one who was indignant at the father's grace and forgiveness towards the other brother. Both of them were wrong. But one was like in religious sin, the other was in carnality and physical sin. And all of us tend to gravitate to one or the other of those extremes. But we need to be a Phinehas. We need to be a Phinehas.
I have a paragraph highlighted in the book Everyday Holiness, and it's talking about the importance of showing up wholeheartedly and not allowing his ways and his instructions to become stale. And it talks about how showing up in life isn't enough if we merely show up and go through the religious acts.
It's just empty.
It's empty, drifting along with no passion for living or repeating the same good acts in a routine way. It's a kind of sin. And then everything you're doing is just contaminated.
Yeah.
So we have to show up wholeheartedly and be willing to put our life on the line for what matters.
That's right. And this is what the whole purpose of the wilderness experience is for. You know, we mentioned earlier that this was the last plague, the last test, the last time when bunches of Israelites die. And it's like once this was done, once Phinehas ran that spear through these two sinners, the plague stopped, and God says, okay, game's over. The final buzzer has rung. Now let's tally the score.
Well, what's essential to mention, Grant, is that what Phinehas received as a result was a covenant of
peace.
Shalom.
Yes, a breach shalom, covenant of peace.
And that's so significant.
Only one who's truly passionate for God has real peace in his life.
Yeah.
The ones who are complacent and kind of half-hearted with God, they have haphazard peace. Mm-hmm. But in chapter 26, verse 1 says, it was after the plague. So in other words, game over. Adonai spoke to Moses, to Eleazar, son of Aaron the Kohen, saying, take a census. So we had a census way back at the beginning of the book of Numbers.
So count the people again. Let's see where we're at.
And he says, now it's time for a new census. Because now we're going to tally the score. And if you go through and you add up the numbers, you
Which
find...
seems so boring on the surface.
It seems boring, but there's something profound and deep going on here. When you get to the end of chapter 26, or close to the end, verse 51, says, these are the countings of the sons of Israel. 601,730.
So what?
So what? Well, if you compare that to the total found back in chapter 1, verse 46, we find that there are 1,820 fewer Israelites now than there were in chapter 1.
Okay, so what?
So over the 40 years, the ones who died outpaced the ones who were born.
Wow.
But that number, 1,820, is so fascinating because it equals the number of God's name, which is 26, times 70, the number of perfection. And it's like God's saying, I'm in the middle of this.
Yeah.
I had to reduce.
Yeah.
People had to die, new ones be born. But after all this testing, this is the right number. What's interesting is God's name, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, occurs exactly 1,820 times in the Torah. You can't make this stuff up. So God was in the middle of all of this and the reduction of the number of Israel. But what I love is the moment the census is done, you have this census, and the next verse, verse 52, Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, to these shall the land be divided as an inheritance. So he's saying, okay, we've tallied it up. Here's the score. Now it's time to award the trophies.
Wow.
These are the ones who survive the wilderness. These are the ones who go into the land.
They cross over again.
And all these testings and the pain and the death and everything, I want to be a survivor.
Right.
I want to be a Joshua and a Caleb. I don't want to be the ones who fall in the wilderness.
And they were only 2 out of 12.
Yes.
Who had the
It's
courage.
the minority.
Well, I was talking to a good friend recently, and I said, we always talk about how God doesn't want us to remain in Egypt, but he also doesn't want us to remain in the wilderness.
He doesn't want us to die in the wilderness
We
either.
have to go through the wilderness. It's an essential
detours.
part of this journey. It's what this lifetime is about, so that the things that are in our soul that need to be dealt with can die, and we're challenged to trust and to keep going. But he wants us to cross over that next river, doesn't he, Jordan, and enter into the place of abundance and peace.
Yeah. George MacDonald, one of my favorite authors, not the modern novelist, the one that lived back in the 1800s, he said something to the effect that God will destroy everything that needs destroyed. He'll burn whatever needs burned. He'll shake whatever needs shaken. Because these things are the things of the enemies of our souls. And he is a consuming fire, but he's not there to burn us up. He's to burn up the things that can destroy us.
Because he's jealous for us.
Yes. He has kana for us. He's bought us, and he wants to destroy anything that can harm us. And the thing is, the true enemy of my soul, I carry around inside of me.
Right.
My yetzer hara, my evil inclination.
What my eyes and my heart
yeah.
carry me away with.
My apathies and my ambitions and my desires, all of these things are the things that are destructive to my soul. And so we experience God's fire in our lives and his shaking in our lives. And the whole world's getting shaken right now.
And sometimes, Grant, let's just be really honest. Lately, you and I, we sometimes feel kind of lonely.
Yeah.
We're looking around going, hey, where are all those people that are supposed to
Yeah.
be on this journey with us and have the zeal
Yeah.
to cross over and to obey and to remember what matters in this world and not to be seduced,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, the question's asked, when Yeshua returns, will he find faithfulness on the earth?
Oh, I want to be
Well, I'm
faithful.
determined he'll find at least one, and I know you're determined he'll find another one, so we make two. And I hope our listeners decide he's going to find me faithful.
Yes.
I'm going to be at my post doing what I've been called to do, because the reward is not here. The reward is there.
And we're not on our own here. We have a shepherd.
We have a shepherd.
And in this portion, it was so touching to me when Moses passed the torch, so to speak, to Joshua, whose name, as we know, is the same as Yeshua.
Yeah.
It was so apparent that Moses had a shepherd's heart, and he saw and recognized, well, God saw and recognized that Joshua too had the same shepherd's heart.
Yes.
And in John 10, we're reminded where Yeshua says, I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own hear my voice. So it's not like we're wandering through this wilderness on our own, abandoned. He shepherds us,
Yeah.
but we have to stay close, and we have to determine to hear his voice.
Well, you know, it's in chapter 27, verse 20. Verse 18. Adonai said to Moses, take to yourself Joshua, son of Nun, a man in whom there is spirit, and lean your hand upon him. He shall stand him before Eleazar the Cohen and before the entire assembly, and command him before their eyes. And then verse 20, you shall place some of your majesty upon him, so that the entire assembly of Israel will hear. They'll heed, they'll obey. And you know, Joshua, like you said,
He
the
had
same name as
zeal.
Yeshua.
Yes.
But it's a picture of Yeshua. And when we see Yeshua in his majesty, in his glory, he's followed. As many times as he rebelled against Moses, we don't see him rebelling against Yeshua, against Joshua. You read the book of Joshua, and there were some mistakes made by people. But you don't see this open rebellion against Joshua that you saw against Moses.
They drew closer.
Yeah.
They stopped resisting so much.
And they could see his glory.
Ah.
And if we can see the glory of our shepherd, our Messiah, why would I not want to follow him? So we need to keep singing our song and not let it be aligned with my lie, with Cosby.
You know, Psalm 77:6, in my meditation time just this morning, I saw and just got tearful as I read the words, let me remember my song in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. Then my spirit made a diligent search.
Yeah.
David is realizing that even in the night, when things feel dark and everybody seems like they're giving up and following after their eyes, Lord, help me remember
Yes.
the true song that you've given me. That is my song, even in the night, and then my heart will be restored.
There you go. Yeah, let's keep singing our song.
Yeah.
Let's keep singing our song.
Well, we kind of went a different direction even than we were intending to go.
Oh, we finished up a completely different place that we'd set
Not
out
even
for,
in the
but-
same zip code. But you
No.
know what? We always pray wholeheartedly at the beginning of this conversation that Hashem will speak somehow what we need to hear, all of us, his people, and strengthen us for these days, because
That's right.
these days are getting darker, but we have a shepherd, we have a
We
shepherd,
do.
and he is zealous for us. He's jealous
He
for
so
us.
is. And we need to be zealous for him.
Amen.
Because
Absolutely.
we belong to our beloved, and our beloved belongs to us.
Enough said.
Enough said. So, until next time, wish you shalom.
And be encouraged.
Yes, and God bless.
Thank you for joining us for today's teaching. If the work of Torah Today Ministries has touched your life, please consider making a donation or sponsoring an upcoming video. As a video sponsor, you'll have an exclusive opportunity to memorialize a family member, celebrate a special event, or simply support the ongoing creation of similar content. Your tax-deductible contribution helps ensure that our teachings continue to reach all who are longing for truth. Click the link or visit our website to learn more.